right, welcome to the South Burlington School Board meeting. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'll call this meeting to order. And do we have amendments to the agenda, David?
We do, so we need to take off number 5, the student residency waiver request.
All right.
And that is it.
Okay. Any comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we will move to announcements.
So you have announcements at your place. And I think the first bullet would be an important one. And although I wouldn't have forgot it, Delina is always good with making sure I'm recognizing such things. So Martin, congratulations for being elected. Also, we were happy to have with us Rebecca Holcomb yesterday, and we had the opportunity for both Dan and Julie to sit in on that for about a half hour while she visited specifically Tuttle Middle School. She was there from 11 until, it was supposed to be 1, but she stayed until around 1:30. Traveling around, eating lunch with the students, visiting classrooms, and connecting. Typical things that start happening in November is the book fair will be happening at Chamberlain, and then it starts to move around. Nancy Lavarnway, which is also included, she's been reappointed to the Vermont Commission on Women for the second 4-year term. I think safe to say, you know, there's been all kinds of great activities going on, but certainly the boys soccer I happened to be at when froze because it went on for a long time. But it was good to see them emerge. It was, again, a very good game against Essex, and great play by both teams, but our boys soccer did prevail. And also at your place, again, cross country, there's many other cross country also emerged, but the picture in front of you actually is a yesterday event, and this is one of the things that I've talked about with the board around our business connections. Not just to go and visit, and not just to host and have them host their conference room, but actually to participate with us. And we began at 7:30 to 9:30. Really, it was work with them around making connections, understanding what they do, what we do, and then opportunities for the future. And again, this represents, you know, the staff picture. But Stuart, maybe just a quick couple of highlights on that, maybe, if
Sure.
you wouldn't mind.
So we went to VSAC yesterday, and obviously VSAC, you know, has a greater role in relationship with us than some of the other businesses may traditionally have. We have VSAC presence at the high school on a fairly regular basis, and you know, obviously our students, or anybody who's been through that process with students, knows that VSAC is part of that process. But a lot of what we talked about is how to get more contact into the middle school and the elementary schools. We talked about the kids who don't have a plan. You know, how can we identify those kids and really work together? Because, you know, VSAC likes to point out, just as we do, that it's not just about four-year college, it's about training after high school of some kind. You really need a secondary experience or after secondary experience. And so that was a lot of what our conversation was about. And we'll continue to build those ties, and it was a very productive meeting.
Good, and I will just, I know you were going to mention this, David, but I was elected to a 6-year term on VHI, the Vermont Education Healthcare Initiative. That's okay, I know it wasn't a big deal.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that goes again, not to just add more to that, but at the I was very fortunate. We missed Diane, but 4 members of the board were at the VSBA conference on Thursday and Friday, and I think just general feedback from the folks that were down there were very impressed with, you know, it's kind of South Burlington and the information that was shared specific to collective bargaining, but also to healthcare. And Elizabeth was on a panel Friday morning in front of a full house talking about kind of the healthcare thoughts, process, and information that went around that. So, and again, I shared with them, so a lot of it, I heard some sidebar conversations about good information and articulate, and so I think people were generally really welcoming of the information.
Can you explain for the viewing audience what VHI is and what it entails? Because I think it's important that it be known what your position is and what VHI does.
Well, I haven't had a meeting yet, but
He's putting you on the spot.
yeah. VHI is the Vermont Educators Healthcare Initiative. It's a not-for-profit organization that's a collaboration between Visbit and
Vermont NEA.
Well, in the School Boards Insurance Trust and Vermont NEA. And there are 5 board members. 2 are from the Vermont NEA, and 3 represent school districts in the form of superintendents, business managers, school board members, and really administer. The best description I have is really they serve as kind of the brokerage for a number of benefits, including healthcare, dental, long-term disability, and wellness programs and employee assistance programs. So they negotiate on behalf of not only educators, but their families as well. And I think they cover about 43,000 individuals in their system. That sounds like a lot to me, but it does include all family members as well. And obviously they have a key interest in understanding what their role will be, particularly in healthcare on a going forward basis. I think that's probably the best description. So I will serve as one of the board members that represents school districts in that capacity.
Excellent.
Good.
Also in your packet was a CDC weekly bulletin, and again, we don't necessarily, some of you may be recipients of that, but Nancy Lavarne Way also just, a lot of information when we talk about the work that some of our students are doing through the Career Development Center and making those connections. I thought it would be just nice to highlight some of that for you. And if you'd like to be on that, you can. I'll probably not highlight this every week for you, or every time we meet, but there's a lot of things going on there that represent, important steps for students.
All right, seeing no student representative, I guess we will skip the student rep report and move on to city-school collaboration.
I don't really have any newer update with that. We're in the process of really waiting to see what the city wants to do around our continued meetings. Elizabeth and I have in the past met with Pam McKenzie, who was the former chair, and Kevin Dorn, and we're waiting currently, as you know, if maybe you don't know, but Pam McKenzie has left the position, and they're in the process of determining who will be the chair of the council, and once we know that, we'll put back into play our meetings. We're a little sensitive. We know that there's a lot of activity. We've had quite a bit of activity going on too. We think these meetings are important, so I'll keep you posted on when that happens.
Do they have reorganization of their council scheduled on an upcoming agenda?
I do believe that's happening. I think they're working through whether it's an appointment, whether it's an election. I'm not really exactly sure. I haven't gotten an update really from Kevin on where that is.
As far as the chair or
the chair, and chair and reappointment or appointment of
John Simpson is the
So you have more information than I do. Yeah,
is the new council.
Well, we knew he was appointed in the 5th.
But as far as the chair, we don't.
As far as the other.
Yeah.
And Pat Nowak has been acting chair.
She has been until at least for these past meetings.
Okay. All right, unless there's anything else on city school, we'll shift to agenda item 11, master planning and financial stewardship.
So this should have been changed as an amended because there's no action required on this one either. I should have mentioned that in the beginning. We're still in the process of working out the financials. We're close, I think. I'm reluctant to have it as an action item until I have some level of finality with the city around the financials. However, we're not holding up. We're moving forward with our upcoming meeting, and we have our first kind of just formation of our meeting tomorrow at 6 o'clock, 6 to 8. We may not go that whole time, but it really is to pull together our individuals that we've identified that submitted their names and or that have expressed interest in being part of the committee in the past. We've got a very good group, I think, coming forward, so it's really to understand kind of the scope and sequence of the work and some of the information that will likely be coming their way. This meeting will be really with Kevin Dorn and myself with the group, and making sure they understand kind of the commitment out of the gate. We've informed them of that. Also get a chance for each of them to meet one another, answer any questions they might have around kind of that commitment and the charge. We have some work still to do on the charge, a little bit of reshaping on the charge, which Martin and Dan actually did quite a bit of work on. But with the council kind of being a little bit in flux, I want to make sure that that charge is grounded and accurate for what we do. So we don't have a lot of time. We're trying to. I want to keep this moving forward, but so again, this first meeting I think is important. Regardless of where we're going to be on the funding side, we know we want this commitment. I'll share with you at some point, probably following tomorrow night, just the individuals that have kind of confirmed. But we've got a good list of, again, city, community, school, parent, business, and some of the folks that have also expressed interest through the past processes, like the 5th grade groups that we've had to be part of that.
So do we have a number of appointments to this steering committee? How many will be on it?
We're right now saying, somewhere between 12 and 16 is where we're at for a total number. Not everybody will likely be able to make all of the meetings. Mm-hmm. There's been a little bit of some retooling of the meetings to have some task force meeting focus in the beginning before the first community meeting. Initially, we had a couple task force meeting and then a community meeting. And again, the thought behind that would be to make sure we understand all of the options. What are the doable options? I'm going to exaggerate. If there's 20 options, can that be quelled down to 5 or 6 or 7 that might be then presented in front of the first community meeting and solicit feedback from the community? That doesn't mean that at the community meeting somebody can't put up an idea, as we want that to be fluid. So. And
right now, when is the first community meeting scheduled for?
Let's see, I can tell you that.
Is that whole calendar going to need to be?
Yeah, there's some shifting right now on the calendar, but generally we're going to work to try to keep that. So around the December 16th time frame is where it's at right now, Elizabeth. And that would give 1, 2, 3 task force meetings beforehand, and then task force meeting would follow. We actually need to discuss the 21st when we come to future agenda items. January 21st is a Wednesday, a school board meeting, and we would like to see if we could move our board meeting to keep the steering committee meeting. It's going to be pretty lengthy because it will be both budget, and we'd like to be able to have a task force meeting
Is
update.
that the first? I was going to ask when the next steering committee was.
That one is our next one, and then we have a proposed second one, which would be in March, depending on how things are moving along with the task force.
Okay.
So.
Great.
Anybody has any other questions?
Okay. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 12, the superintendent's report.
So there's 3 items here: school calendar modification, Orchard School Facility, and IRS audit. So the calendar, I think I've had the opportunity to share with most of you around and you've seen correspondence. It's on the March 2nd and 3rd is the makeup. This makes a complete week in that week of March. And again, I've sent out communication to all employees who have requested or had any question around time off or use of personal time, and have said no. We think that this gives ample notice. I think this gives ample notice for families and staff to make necessary arrangements if they have made travel arrangements, etc., to make sure they're going to be here for the 2nd and 3rd of March. Again, let me just pause. Any questions related to that? I don't need to overtalk that. You've probably heard enough from me already on this. No questions?
No.
So the Orchard School, we happen to be here. Again, welcome to the Orchard School. I know Mark welcomed you earlier. This school we've been working probably shortly after the start of the year, as the report says, around what we'll say is just some concerns around water. This particular school, we believe, has a fairly high water table, and some of the classrooms on the 2-3 wing, which is the wing that is across from us, and it goes down east and west, has had, one of the rooms had a fairly, pungent smell, kind of earthy smell. I don't want to say it at that point it wasn't mildew or was, but certainly smelled very musty. Mark, John, and Bart Maselli, and myself made the decision to move the teacher out of that room so we could really understand what was going on. All kinds of testing that was done on that room, air sampling and testing. And we're currently have done some things to retile the floor. The floor was wet. The glue was not adhering, high moisture content on the floor. So we've done some mitigation around lowering the humidity levels in that room. We're currently still exploring ways in which we can understand what's going on with the water table here at this school, and how we can work both with the city and with contracted engineers to figure out how we can diminish the water table. At present, we've gotten results back today. John and I met with teachers, along with Mark, met with teachers here yesterday afternoon, and just wanted to answer any of their questions, let them know that the things that we're doing, and listen to them. We did not have the results of the test yesterday, the second round. They've been shared with everybody now, and the results have all come back, conclusive and within the appropriate range. I mean, one of the hard things to do is there's no real set standards around some of these other areas, whether it smells or a variety of other organisms. There's no real set limit. Basically, they measure the outside to the inside, and obviously you want the inside lower than the outside, but there may be a presence of the irritants that are out there, and it has resulted in some irritation to some of our staff that have been in that particular wing. So we're working through it. We're happy to report that the smell has mitigated and gone away. We're going to continue to just monitor that a little bit longer, and hopefully move the teacher back in. So at the same time, we're working, as I said, around some mitigation with, in this case, civil engineering associates to try to figure out what's going on. So.
Yeah, I don't know if, I didn't see responses to questions on the table. Are those here, or did those get?
Yeah, I know that some were answered. I did not get to two of them. Are they on? We don't have them, do we?
We did get to, there was a question about Orchard.
Yes.
I have it, the answer. There was a flood in 2004 in this wing. So that was a separate issue. Okay. In 2012, there was a sewer backup that caused us a lot of trouble. We had to dig up the front hallway. This water table issue is unique to those other two. So
so they're not linked together.
They're not.
Yeah, I had recalled the flooding issue and wondered if there was.
I thought they kind of were, but meeting with the teachers, many of the teachers have been here 20 years, and they said, "Oh no, it was back here. The other addition was flooded." So, so they're not related, but the groundwater is the source of the problem.
So we're gonna listen to the professionals to figure out how we can perhaps come up with a plan to mitigate some of this, and we'll keep you posted around that.
Did we, out of curiosity, have extra classroom space?
Well, the project rooms, as you know, 1995 they added project rooms to this school as a result of some larger class size and taking up some of the available space. So we were able to move one of the teachers into an open classroom. We have occupied already on that end. The project room was already occupied. So the answer is yes, we were able to move them. We don't have much other place. That's right. Yeah. So if there's others that come up, we're kind of in a pinch. Then we would have to work to probably move into a staff room, etc. So.
Okay. Any other questions? All right.
The IRS audit, again, I'll let John speak to this a little bit, but again, I think safe to say some of you knew of some of the activity that was going on in and around the teacher negotiation, we also had a fair amount of other activity going on in the business office around audits. But John, you want to just talk to the IRS audit?
Right, it's an audit that I'm not sure if it's random, but they pick certain municipalities and school districts to audit. And they picked the year 2012. They look at the payments that we made through accounts payable and payroll. They have a file of that, and they look to see if we've paid contractors correctly or as employees, and if we've issued a 1099 and a W-2 form to the same person, what's the reason? Was that valid? And it's going to be very extensive. Because of the transfer of files these days, the auditor doesn't have to be on site to analyze data. So the data that he received 2 weeks ago, he'll come back with questions, and we'll be back and forth a lot during our budget time. So it'll probably wrap up in January. We're allowed to have our auditor or attorney help us when questions come up. So
was 2012 the same auditor that we have today?
yes. Yes.
Well, would it be? I thought we had, we're sharing an auditor with the city right now, right?
It's the same. RHR Smith,
2012.
Ron Smith, yes.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yes.
And have we gone through an audit before?
No. We have a couple of longtime employees who, with their memory, had never remembered that. So, the city of Montpelier went through this 2 years ago, and their business manager did a presentation on it on tips on how to handle things, and so I was very appreciative of that. So,
Good.
Thank you, John.
All right. Unless there's any other questions on that, we will move to administrative reports.
So first up is the one-to-one initiative, and in your packet is the report. And I'm going to let Stuart answer any of those questions, or we'll kick it off maybe with just a general overview. Stuart, that'd be great.
Right, so this is the 4th year of the one-to-one program. It is our first full implementation year. That is, we started with the 8th, 9th grade in year 1, and this year 7th through 12th grade, all students have a one-to-one device, which is a Dell PC of some sort or another. The newer ones are a little nicer than the older ones, but this year's 12th grade, basically all through high school, has had a 24/7 device that they've used. And overall, we're pretty pleased with the program. You know, I don't like to make correlations that aren't necessarily so, but this 12th grade, as 11th graders, did have good, compared to others, kneecap scores, especially around issues in writing. Again, it's a cohort, so it could have been that without the one-to-ones, they might have had the same results, and there are other things that are factoring in, but we really do believe that this has become a way of, one of the ways they access their education. One of the things that Mr. Burke has said about this particularly is what it does is it does create an equity issue. That there are students who would not have this access. Obviously there are students in this district who would have access whether the district provided or not, but this way all students really have an equal footing, and they've had an equal footing through high school through this technology. These are not without issues. One of the big things, we have the 4-year lease. Big piece for us this year is the batteries. The 4-year computers really, become, or have become, at least at this point, many of them close to useless. We had to spend about $8,000 in battery replacement that we hadn't really counted on doing. So one of the things is, since we'll be starting our next cycle of leases for next year, we're looking at things that may include the battery within the piece. We're looking at the Chromebooks that we purchased in some of the schools to see if they may be a cheaper alternative to some of the things that we could lease either for 2 years so that you wouldn't have some of the problems with older computers, but for no increase in cost. I mean, the commitment is this is now pretty much a flat budget item. Not that it's not a lot of money, but that the goal is to keep the money the same 7 through 12 all through the period of the piece. So those are some of the key things. We collect them all every summer, and whether that will be something that we will continue to do. I mean, more and more kids want to use those computers during the summer, and so one of the challenges for us is how we would maintain them and continue to keep them in good shape. But we do have a great relationship with Dell. One of the reasons we went with the Dell is their complete care has really been complete care. And they refurbish computers that need to be. They work with our people so that we can do the work. There's a quick turnaround. I don't have much else to add. I don't know if, John, you want to add anything on the financial end or some of the IT?
Battery part is you've handled, and I do think that our IT department looks at what is the best arrangement price-wise, and looking at Chromebooks is a next step to at least see if that, because that would significantly reduce the cost of each unit.
Actually, we're looking at a variety of vendors. We've had a company Amplify in. We're going to be meeting with the Mac people. We obviously will continue to look at, you know, Dell and then the question of Chromebooks versus PCs, you know, at what grade level and if they're appropriate, based on, you know, educational criteria and at the same time, you know, as we said, across the community can afford. So, you know, we try to keep those pieces all together. It's always an expanding piece, trying to use more and more e-resources, trying to cut back on paper. You know, there's it's very interesting because the tools are in hand, and it's always that question of breaking, you know, certain kinds of habits. That you know, computers were supposed to make a paperless age, and as you know, with computers we actually burn a lot more paper sometimes than before. And our goal is still to do that, and we're working with it. The middle school in particular has really been working actually with you know, some questions around really letting teachers know what are the e-resources that can replace their paper resources, or that their paper resources that they've used for years are actually online in many cases. So, you know, we continue to work on that.
That was actually my question. I had a question in that area about the reducing costs, fewer textbooks, paper. Have you noticed any differences? Is there a reduction in number of textbooks ordered since this program was launched? Initiative was launched?
It's not really fair to say that because we've actually had a reduction in textbooks ordered, but that's been more about the Common Core. Though this year we, you know, bought new math books in the middle school, but we basically put a moratorium on math books at the high school and some other pieces, so we wouldn't be buying texts that weren't aligned with the Common Core. So I can't make that correlation in a fair way.
So is the plan that resources like textbooks will be online?
Yes.
Well, more and more companies, you know, are providing that. They've been behind really in allowing, you know, or making it cost effective for us
Well,
to
it's the
have
cost effective piece because, I mean, it's cost effective in the sense that it's greener, but it's the textbook companies, since they own the priority in the preparatory rights, they haven't reduced the cost of textbooks just because they're sending you an e-document, you know. So whether it's $80 for a hardbound book or they're charging you $80, you know, per unit for their textbook. But that's not all true. I mean, those are the things that we're researching so that we can look for, you know, comparable resources that may cost us.
And one of the things that's not called out here, and I think, you know, is important. I mean, we know this is a huge investment in this district, and I think, you know, we're very mindful of that. I do think it's in the best interest, you know, for helping our kids progress through the system and meeting the needs that our ends outline. A cost avoidance piece that I think we've done really well at is to not have what I would say redundant service. And in many locations where these types of initiatives have been put in, they've not really recognized the diminishment of what we would say the desktop devices. They've actually still require desktop devices in most of their locations because their device doesn't necessarily do everything that it needs to. If you walk into our high school, you won't find, I don't think you'll find, but just in some of the critical offices, a desktop that will be there. All of the staff, or the teachers have their laptops, and so that's been helpful for us when we look at kind of the management. Obviously, we have an uptick in one-to-one or laptop devices, but we've also seen a diminishment of what we'll say the desktop computers.
As we're headed into budget season, I'm looking at the run rate here of over $450,000 for next year and the out years. I really hope as we go into the budget that we are looking to document in a way that the community can absorb and understand, sort of the total cost impact, which would include, you're bringing up cost avoidance. I think there are some elements of student outcomes here, some that may not be quantifiable, but some that could be. Efficiencies and productivity, whatever it may be, that kind of lead to the return on that significant investment. Because if we're going to be going to the community every year for another about $500,000 associated with this program, I think
good point.
That's what we need to be accountable to the community for.
Certainly.
Just follow up on that a little bit. Are these costs that are in this expense schedule, are they all for devices?
These are expenses, and when John comes back, you could ask him particularly about that.
Okay.
Because these are all the costs of running the one-to-one program, but I don't know that it includes salary cost of help desk or any of that.
Well,
now you'd have to ask John.
Things like support and overall software that's not on the device and things like, are there any infrastructure gaps that need to be attended to that are going to be?
No, I mean, we pretty much, we continue to strengthen our Wi-Fi for a number of reasons. One of the things that's really important to remember is that starting this year in April, all students will 3rd through 8th grade and in 11th grade will be taking a computer-based test and the SBAC. And that's obviously, the wave of the future. I would tell you that, my belief is kids who are in the 5th grade now probably won't have a paper SAT, to take just based on, this kind of trending. So one of the things that's really clear is the familiarity in working with devices, obviously, is going to help. And clearly in our elementary schools, they don't have the same access as our 7th through 12th graders do. But also, that being said, that those are things we would be upgrading mostly anyway. We don't have labs that we take care of anymore. So we're pretty much been able to stay flat within the present infrastructure. I think the next question, Dan, will really be at an infrastructure level is the question of servers versus cloud. And the question of if, more and more of a Google format happens, we have a pretty high server, because we run Outlook, we run Microsoft, that in the next 3 to 4 years we'll be looking and seeing, is that the technology? And that could lower, some of our infrastructure costs if we didn't have servers to maintain. But obviously there are a lot of questions about security, about reliability. It's not like it really is a magic cloud. It really is servers somewhere. It's just not our servers. So those are questions, that I think in the long term we'll have to be looking at.
But at this point, there are no glaring extraneous costs that have been identified?
I mean, the biggest issue obviously is always the educational one. We have basically the equivalent of, 2 FTEs for, IT education, Steve and Kristen, and they're working with the whole district. We have, Chromebooks now at Orchard, at Chamberlain, at Central, 6th graders at the middle school, and of course the 7 through 12, and they've been doing a lot of work with teachers. It's the same thing like anything else. We could sure use more of those, but we don't need more of those, because the more people that we have who can do that and take up that kind of slack, the more we use the machines. But we also have students who know more about machines and technology than ever before at some levels. We know that one of the issues, being programming, is something that a small group of kids do at the high school. We have that program. We need to figure out how to expand because, we have these devices and kids could learn how to do a lot of things with them. Obviously, programming itself has made it that everybody can use machines, seamlessly, but, what does that mean long term? So those are, challenges ahead.
John, you stepped out and you got committed to something, but
Oh.
I'm kidding.
Cost.
It was just the question of whether the
yeah.
cost sheet here, John,
Yes.
whether this really just reflects the machines themselves or any other costs within the infrastructure of.
No, the infrastructure is its own budget. These are
Right.
the end user machines. Yes.
So, Stuart, I think you answered the question, but my question in addition to that was, have you identified any surprises that we're going to be facing in budget time that are infrastructure elements as opposed to the devices and immediate cost for those devices?
The cable, the fiber cable that we have is actually getting kind of old. And the company was level 3. There's going to be some negotiations in the next few years about that, but it's not in the 16 budget. And the switching, we have a wonderful wireless network, but to get the hooked up to the wireless, the WAPs they call them, the switching in our district is one of the things that needs to be replaced. So IT will have a request in the budget for that.
For 16?
For 16, yes. But we've talked about it, and they're going to be able to spread the cost over some years. So, yes, there should be an increase in the budget, but I don't think it'll be real significant. Short term.
And I think as we're talking about presenting this run rate on the program that's inclusive of teacher and student computers, we probably ought to be talking about that in terms of a fully burdened cost when we talk about the budget that would include staff.
Staffing and the backup, the back room. Yeah, yes.
Kind of the whole,
Okay.
the whole view of
And
the technology.
the other question I have is that this, it looked like this damage level is pretty significant. I mean, that's like 65%. Are we, I don't know what those repairs were needed, but are we holding students accountable to the contracts that they're signing?
Yeah, so some is, is wear and tear damage. We're really trying to work on that just to keep the computers, conditioned, and of course it's included in the cost, so there's no extra process. When there is damage caused by negligence and or other issues, students are held accountable. The middle school has one system of level 1, level 2, level 3, where you lose some of your computer rights, such as the ability to take them home. The high school does it more on an individual kind of basis, with the using their own
Do we know
system.
what the kind of the triage on the 687 laptops needing to be shipped to Dell for repairs? Do we know?
They're a wide variety, but most of those really, they're things, remember, a lot of them I think were the machines, coming into their 4th year, keys, just loose pieces. One of the issues, facing the middle school kids who are getting old computers that weren't theirs, so seniors, that's their computer. So like the same as the dent in their old jalopy, it's their dent. But, obviously the middle school kids are getting, scuff marks and told this is a thing, take really good care of it. And they're looking at it and it doesn't look like a new machine to them. And that is another issue when we look at, is there a cheaper way to go, where we would only need a 2 or 3 year lease to do either the same cost or less, is certainly one of the reasons that we're looking at that, because, 4 years of wear of any device is that you carry around, is 4 years of wear.
And as far as that goes, I have that concern. we've leased the computers. So there's a bank that has a vested interest in us taking care of those. What I found, and through Andy Pearson mostly, was that Dell considers that pretty normal, that rate. And what's developed as the first summer we had Dell send people here to do work to clean those up. The second year they sent parts and people to clean them up. This year they said, look, it's going to be a lot easier just to send these to Texas, and we'll fix them and get them back to you. And they got all but 50 back on time. So in a perfect world, yeah, there wouldn't be anything, but they consider that normal wear.
I know when we started out these conversations, we projected a certain amount of damage, and I just didn't know if this was in line with what we
It is.
anticipated.
In the four-year term is pretty long. We expect them. We can't do it any other way financially, though. We need to keep them for 4 years. So,
You know, at the cost of the machines we have presently. It is one of the reasons, again, that we went with Dell, because they gave us the best package on that question of maintenance. You
Right.
know, I mean, so that was certainly a big consideration when we chose a company to work with. And they've been also, you know, Mike Finding spends a lot of time on the phone with a lot of different vendors. And in the end, they always seem to.
I mean, we definitely need to, provide you with as much, information around this as a useful educational tool. I mean, those of you who, have walked through the schools, you see kids in different places in different parts of the school doing a variety of things. Could be from testing and doing a science experiment in the hallways on, speed and velocity, with an attached device. So there's a lot of really neat things going on. And I mean, part and play is that, we've extended the classroom well beyond what it used to be, but not without some challenges. Certainly educating and updating our teachers, taking care of the devices. And I think, Stuart hit on a really important point for the elementary, where we're going to have the Smarter Balance assessment, and one of those pieces is about keyboarding, being able to articulate and writing by keyboard. And so it challenges us to make sure that we're doing the kind of the fundamental things around keyboarding, and how that interfaces with the student's ability to, in a short period of time, put a statement together. So it's challenging us. I think we're well positioned with what we've been allowed to do thus far. But
And has there been
Just to clarify that too, I mean, we've been doing keyboarding for a while,
Right.
But one of the things we realized is kids did their 20 minutes of keyboarding, but they didn't have practice. So keyboarding without practice has not been very effective. And so we're re-looking at that whole question of how do we get kids to practice. The Common Core says by 4th grade a student should be able to sit and do a page of composing on a keyboard. By 5th grade, 2 pages. That should be within their norm of just being able to do that. And that's a big step.
Just a couple of questions as well. A couple areas related to what's going on in the classroom and also what's going on at home. With respect to what's going on in the classroom, a couple questions. As far as with respect to professional development, are we really steering teachers or making sure that teachers, or make sure that the money that we have for professional development is being used for the technology side of things? Is there any kind of professional development opportunities that we're offering, or is there are we not allowing teachers to take some professional development because it's not technology related? Are we getting the most bang for our professional development bucks for technology is one concern I have. The other, and I don't, it's somewhat related, is how a teacher is using technology and how they're using the laptops in the classroom. Has that been incorporated, or is there a plan to incorporate that into the teacher evaluations, which kind of goes hand in hand with the professional development as well, because it can help point out what professional development might be used. What is the status of that? Those two
I hit the
things.
first one.
Well, I'll hit a few of them, actually. So You know, there are a number of years that we ran basically workshops in which many people used their professional development money for technology pieces. You may remember that was where we also rebated them back some money for technology. At one point, a lot of the projectors that we have in our district came through that, and then there was the question of who owned the technology, and if we hung it, and eventually we stopped doing installations. We also stopped doing that because we reached the point where the district was providing technology. People didn't have to take some of the professional development money. So now it's more embedded. So for example, the 6th grade with the Chromebooks, some of their team planning time, Carson is scheduled for Steve and Kristen to work with them directly on the tools that are within the Chromebooks, and they're doing similar work here. Obviously, it's always hard to find time in the given day, teachers have planning time and they have kids. But we're really trying to work within that framework to roll them out in a way that's very effective with teachers, and additionally to always provide after-school workshops and opportunities around specific pieces, and to be in the buildings for projects. So that we do as a normal matter of course, and we're doing more and more and trying to be more efficient in that process. In terms of the pools of professional development money, past practice has been pretty much, the goal is tied into the goals of the district and some other pieces, but it has never been, it must be used in X, Y, or Z, except for that framework of, showing it the bigger piece. So and that's a contractual issue, and I don't want to really say,
freedom there.
Right. But there's some controls that the district can exercise.
So this comes to your second question about evaluation, and so as Stuart outlined, we have worked, and again, some of you sat through a little bit of the middle school kind of information around goals and objectives and what they're working on. We probably ought to provide you with a little bit of what each school is working on. But within each school, there's a professional development kind of plan that's aligned to a district plan that has specific goals. And so Stuart outlined some of those that are specific to technology. So the teachers, the teams, have to be participating in that. And if they so choose to not be, then their evaluation would be reflective of that they're not doing that. So,
one of the pieces, Martin, so the state, within the new educational quality standards and the transferable skills, is very clear that technology needs to run through all the transferable skills. So certainly within meeting our goals for proficiency-based graduation, we are going to need to continue to do that. But a few years ago, the whole TLC in the high school was based on technology. This year, it's based on PBGRs, on proficiency-based graduation. Will technology come up in another rotation? Probably. But those are the pieces, everything's happening at once, and so not any one thing, is happening.
So the answer, I think, is yes. We're going to continue to need to be mindful of, how we continue to do that. Certainly, we have many systems that are a requirement. I mean, EDU, for instance, is a requirement. So you have to go to the professional development to be comfortable with how you're going to articulate and keep information available for students to, provide their information, and for me to provide feedback to their work. So, to say everybody's on the same plane, they're not. I mean, we definitely have people that are coming into our system that are far more technologically competent and comfortable, and we have others that we're needing to provide kind of the onboarding, or support. I wouldn't say onboarding, support for that.
But it just seems to be, it should be an important part of teacher
Absolutely.
evaluation, given the investment that we're making into it.
No
And it
question.
shouldn't just, EDU is a great system, but it's not transforming education
Right.
in any manner. It's
I'm not going to do justice to the right buckets here, but obviously classroom instruction and the use of technology,
Right.
and how that provides
Right.
Universal design for all students, access, to other critical pieces of information, the systems of accounting, like EDU, there's others in there, classroom information presentation, delivery, etc., are probably some of the other. I'm not necessarily hitting all the right buckets, but definitely, we want to make sure that teachers are getting feedback that if they're not moving on these things, that's unacceptable.
Right.
And we have some examples where administrators are exercising the right kind of pressures to make that happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and the second just area that I'm concerned about is what happens in the homes. And the facilitating internet access is certainly one of the important parts, but do we really know what problems parents are running into? Are we keeping close track of that? And are we offering sufficient solutions for parents in dealing with the fact that we put laptops in their homes? And maybe we are, but I just don't get the impression that we are. Has there been a survey of parents, or is there just a matter of keeping track of all the complaints that might be coming in? Are we looking for trends? Are we looking for ways that we can help a parent get their kids to use the computers properly? I know there's contracts that need to be signed, and I know there's some different avenues. And I don't need an answer necessarily what's happening, but that's definitely a concern. Well, I would like an answer of what's happening, but not necessarily if you don't know it off the top of your head.
I mean, I think we have done a survey. I can't tell you exactly the number of. We have a high percentage of folks that have availability to internet access at home. Right. Where we don't, we've worked hard with Comcast and some of our cable providers for the discounted benefit options, of which we know there's a good number that take advantage of that. So it's on a bi-monthly basis. There's things that they need to do. We have worked hard to get that information to them. I think in the other areas, I don't know, Stuart, if you can.
I mean, clearly we have parents who send in emails with questions, and we try to reply to those as quickly as possible. I'm not sure that we've been as formal as we maybe should be, and I think we did a survey with the parents early on, maybe in year one, but I'm not sure that we have done a survey with parents since then, and that probably is a good idea. We of course try not to bombard parents with surveys every year. Last year, we did one set of surveying, on the ends. Maybe this year is the one, as we build our schedule of what's the kind of information we want and how we want to gather it. Certainly, I think that would be appropriate.
There's definitely, opportunities for, working with our parents, PTOs, around, decision-making around where the computer is, who's monitoring, what's going on,
I also
systems
think
to
an area
monitor.
that we haven't done enough with, as we are learning more about the tools, is doing workshops with parents with the tools that we're teaching your students.
Well, and I guess
because I do think, for example, just the same way as it's good if we do, reading skills with parents, so that you work with your kids reading. Now that this is becoming the norm, just like another form of literacy, as there are tools that we're using with kids, for example, in the cloud with the Chromebooks, having educational opportunities for parents to come in and use those Chromebooks and understand how they work, as well as the one-to-one devices that go home.
Well, here's, let me just throw this out as well, this is school property, this is school equipment, and I know if you're in a company, you have to realize that your emails are not private. What you do on your computer is not private, and that should be the same expectation of the students, I think. But maybe, there's some people who are very much for privacy, and I am too. But if it's a school laptop, we should have control of that. And are there some technologies that we're not using that we can monitor, which I think completely within our right, that the laptops are not being used to either access inappropriate material, or if students are on laptops for 10 hours at a time or whatnot, and the parents may or may not know or be able to control that. And do we have technologies that we can do that from our end and make sure that there's that expectation out there? Because we're putting this tool that is wonderful, and I'm not opposed to the laptop program whatsoever.
First of all, we have filters that are on the system.
Right.
Anything that's, when it's in our building and running through our filter, we have systems in place whereby which things are blocked or not. When they're out on a different, there's still a filter that's in play. It's far
Right, goes through our
different.
system.
So
Right.
there's still a filter that it runs through that blocks information, but it's far different, obviously, at home. So we are, I mean, I think we're always in a position where we should be providing more tools to monitor.
So Martin, I don't know the answer to your question, because I know that when we had desktops that were in the buildings, if somebody got somewhere, it would trigger stuff and we used to do random checks of that kind of stuff. I don't know if we do that with the laptops or not, but I can find out. I'll talk
Yeah,
to
I'm concerned
IT.
about possible liability, I mean, of putting this tool in kids' hands and not having sufficient control. And I don't think the answer is that you can just rely on parents to do
No.
that.
No,
So,
I hear you, and like I said, I don't know to what extent we use some of the tools that we do
Right.
have, that I know we have.
Well,
So will find
I
out.
can't, I think it's good that we give you some more specifics. I know that we have had incidences where individuals have had doing things that have been inappropriate, and as a result of checking back into our system, has flagged. So we've addressed some of those issues and done them on a per student basis.
yeah, and just,
So-
you know, we learned last week at the VSBA conference, this was, what was the name of that website? Or you weren't at that, the Wolf?
Yeah, oh,
This is showing my technical ignorance, but
Yeah, I know what you're talking
there's a
about.
website that is, from what I understand it as, is a cheating website. And you know, that could be one of these inappropriate access to the websites, that we should have some sort of flag on that kind of thing. So, anyway, that's one of my concerns. I won't belabor it anymore, though.
good.
Any other
question.
one-to-one questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Guess who? Time stores. So, just give me a second here.
Well, maybe before we get going, I know if there's any specific questions that you had specific to the science scores. I mean, I think when you look at, it's easy to, you know, you're looking at us in comparison to Vermont. You know, obviously if we add in other Chittenden County schools or whatever the case may be, it begins to become far more difficult to read.
I have some
Yeah,
questions.
great.
I'll just start with grade 8 science. I noticed significant decreases. So the students receiving assistance, SB assistance, 2012, 2013, 40%, 41% met the standard, and that went down to 3%. Is that accurate? It went down by 38%, only
Hold on just a second.
From 12, 13. to
well, from
13, 14.
41% down to 3%. I just wanted to check to see, I see. Is that, and why is that? It's significant. And even the SB no assistance went down by 19%, so.
Right, well, that is accurate.
Yeah.
I will have to check on that 3% figure for you, Diane.
Okay.
You
That's
know, what-
concerning. If it's true, that's
Right.
really concerning.
Sure. You know, the key piece here there are a number of things. You know, one is obviously it's a cohort by cohort test. So unlike the NECAP data 3 through 8, where we can look at, you know, a group, you know, some cohorts are stronger or weaker than others for whatever reason. I don't want to speculate totally because there has not been a change in program since the year before that, or in teachers at the middle school. So sometimes you can say, well, it's a new teacher, or we did a change in program, or something that we really can concretely put our finger on, as opposed to we do believe that the upward trend of the high school scores is based on work that they did on their program over the last several years, where they re-looked at their sciences, at our science for all 9th graders, their biology program, their chemistry program, and you know, we're beginning to see some of that trending. there has not been, remember this is a test of 8th graders for everything for 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. We haven't really changed because we were, up till now, seeming to be going in an upward trend, the program. And of course, the program's just about to change.
Well, even if we don't compare the cohort
No,
groups,
I
the 3%.
totally, 3%, that's why I do, I want to check.
And I also,
that piece.
SB male, grade 8 too. I mean, again, you know, it's looking at one cohort group and another, but still, it's 31. It went down by 31%.
No, I certainly.
So what
Those
might be
were my
better
concerns.
for you to know, and again,
Well, whether that 3% is truly a figure, I think is.
well, what's important is, yes, validation of the data.
Well,
But trend over time for that group would be important to you, because whereby which we certainly are concerned, and you appropriately express it, that what are we doing, you know, with that male population, you know, that is at 34%. What's the story with that, you know, with that particular group? What's the story, and how did they do in assessment the previous year or the previous year? It may be that we've made significant gains for that particular group that doesn't really tell you the story. But I think absent of more of the story, and we owe you kind of some of that.
And that
Next level.
same with students who receive assistance, David. I would like to know more
Agreed.
of that story too.
Yep.
And
I think that's
So
fair.
I think basically it's whenever there's a major change, it would seem that it would beg for an action to either look for a reason for success or
Yep.
look for a reason for a negative change. And then to
Yep.
figure out what action that implies.
Well, and so one of the things that, you know, you're right, you should have a little bit more of the information, at least for these, like we'll say, the flag areas, or, you know, where are larger jumps, and that makes good sense to me. You know, what we were in actually, you know, the room we were in today, some of you probably noticed behind you on the wall was the data wall. And so when you look at that, that's information specific to students. You know, they're not named on there, they're numbers on there. And it has, if you notice, it was below and exceeding the standard, and you kind of saw the clusters of where students were. And so that's kind of work over time. That's, I would say, important data to affirm this work, right?
And part of that data, which is not science, that's
Right.
math and literacy data, you saw the dots, and those dots indicate things.
They didn't really, I didn't
Well,
point
I
that
know
out to
they
them,
didn't spend a
so.
lot of time, but those things indicate things like ELL students, low-income students, special ed students, you know, and they're coded in that way so that when they look at that work on the data wall. But Diane, I have to say that I miss this 3% figure. I'm feeling, you know, bad about that. I had not looked at that chart in
You can come back to
particular,
you with that.
and so I will get back to you
Okay.
on that. And also I'll talk to the middle school in terms of making sure that they, if their improvement team, have looked at that data specifically, because that's the middle school's data. You know, and that's really the key. We do this, you know, so much at the building-based level. So, you know, I apologize for that.
thank you.
I don't know if there's other questions.
Well, I think, you know, one of the things I had brought up in my earlier questions is, and you even said this here, Stuart, I mean, you're pointing out this 12% improvement at the grade 11 SB assistance level and tying that to curriculum, but we're seeing swings of 19%, 37%, 31%, I mean, double digit of significance, and it seems like the answer is always you need the backstory for a cohort group. And I guess
Then
I'm
provide
looking
it,
at it and
right.
saying, in any situation, is 22% at or above standard acceptable within our district?
That
I'm looking at
deviation,
grade
yeah.
4 with assistance. Is 27% in grade 11 acceptable? And, you know, I've always struggled with some of the existing standardized testing when we have to explain it away based on
Right. Well,
a cohort group.
and again, I want to be clear that I wasn't talking about the economic data when I was talking about the general trend of the high school. Our economic data, and I think we've said this from day one, and I think everybody said this from day one, is certainly not, we have not cracked the how do we make improvement for students on assistance of free and reduced lunch. This has been a weakness, not just our weakness, but a weakness of the state, but clearly our weakness as well. And I'm not, you know, I know You know, there have been study groups, there have been work, you know, the teachers have talked about it, they've gone through the data again and again, but we have not made the movement that we would like to make. There are a couple of issues. Again, like I said, the science curriculum is changing, you know, so that we'll begin a totally new science curriculum, totally implemented, you know, 2 years from now, which has some real changes in how we deliver science. But additionally, the other piece in the bigger scale of that is this question of flexible multiple pathways and proficiencies, really identifying, because remember, in a Carnegie system, kids with D- are getting science credits. You know, in other words, we're still in a model, and you know, I'm not telling you a lot of kids get D-, a lot of kids get Bs. And some kids who get Bs may not do so well on standardized tests. I mean, there's a variety of factors. But as we begin to identify proficiencies and do assessments locally around proficiencies in science, literacy, and math, we hopefully will have a better way of identifying students who are not improving.
So when you talked about the improvement in the high school, are you referring to kind of year over year?
What I'm saying is that the factor within the high school is we have over the last several years, and remember only 11th graders are being tested, they're being tested on 9th, 10th, and 11th grade work in terms of PEACE. We have worked really hard to strengthen over the last 4 or 5 years the science curriculum in terms of what earth science looks like for all students, what biology looks like, and what chemistry looks like, which is basically the range of science being evaluated by the spring. And so within the all-student population, you know, we do think that those inching up of a couple of percentage points each year, you know, do indicate that that's generally working. But that still doesn't solve some of those issues of really tracks.
Well, and it's certainly better than the state, but the state is so
Well,
low.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact of the matter is, just to put it in perspective, and again, I don't want to do this as a brag, it's just a statement of fact. We're the second highest high school in the state. Stowe is the only high school that scored higher than us this year on the test. I'm not sure that that means a lot, but it does speak to that the science results versus our 90-something% in literacy results are not anything to write home to your mother about.
Well, this is, again, we have work to do in this area, right? We have work to do on our ends articulation around the academic, you know, providing that. I mean, you're seeing a piece of this, and it's, I think, you know, the story is unclear, right? So it's my you know, commitment to you to provide, you know, additional information around how we're meeting our ends. So that's one of those outline, you know, focuses for me this year, along with Stuart, to get this better figured out.
So is this the last time we will see these data? No.
So there are kneecaps this spring. I mean, it's actually one of the things, you know, the high school in particular, but all the people, this test will come out at the same time we'll be doing SBACs. For the high school, it's the same time they'll be doing AP exams, because there's only a 7-week window for SBACs for the high school, and it, you know, basically starts from June 12th working back. And so one of the things we're working on is how do we create an environment in which instruction goes on and assessment of the type that's being required. It's not been clear yet whether this is the last science kneecap or not. There may be one more year because it's not full implementation of the new science standards. It's not next year, but it's the year after. But the other piece about that is, you know, kneecap science is a local consortium test. There is no national, unlike the SBAC or the PARC, there is no national consortium for either science tests or social studies tests. So if there isn't a kneecap, nobody knows yet what if we replace it, because science isn't required. This isn't part of our, you know, school improvement work. You know, it's part of our school improvement work, but not by the federal standards.
And Stuart, some schools are being granted to take the pilot, right? So are we gonna see a diminishment of some schools that are gonna be, that are piloting?
There's no piloting, everybody's SBAC this year.
Yes, but are there some schools that are exempt from some components of the assessments upcoming?
No.
No?
That was last year. If you did the last year's
SBAC, you didn't do
you
the,
didn't do kneecaps.
and so they're back on doing kneecaps.
Well, there is no kneecap except
Right,
for
right.
science. So that was a 1 year
Only,
for the
yeah.
literacy and the
So
math
our-
that normally
yeah.
happens in the fall,
Yeah.
which we didn't do
did,
this year.
did those results get dialed into AYP? I'm vaguely recalling that
Yes.
those.
So what happens is
Determination?
they were exempt from a change in their AYP status. In other words, the only schools, if for example, our high school had done
Mhm.
that,
pilot.
we would have been out.
Right.
But be that as it may, so people's status didn't change.
Okay.
It stayed either they were in or they were out, wherever they were, because they did the, it wasn't called a
Pilot,
pilot.
yeah.
It's, you know, the
I'm referring
field
to the
test.
pilot SBAC.
The
Field
SBAC
test,
field
yeah,
test.
right. Okay,
Great. All right.
thank you. So ends monitoring,
Guess who?
yeah. And I think just to be, try to be efficient, if there's specific questions before just talking about it. I don't know, start there from board members, or what would be your pleasure?
Let's see if I can find
I can jump in with a question. I note that this is developmental success measures are reported for grades 5, 8, and at graduation. Is there a plan to systematize this across all the grades? I mean, to have it for every grade instead of dipping in on those 3 grades? Or those 3
Well,
times?
So I will say yes and no, okay? I mean, obviously, one of the things that we talked about is, it has been this question of, the previous reports around ends monitoring have been about at 5th grade, 8th grade, and graduation as the places where the dipstick monitoring report went to the board. That's not the only place where they should be monitored, because you know, there should be data just like report cards collected for every year. Within that piece, one of the things that has happened that I want to talk to the board soon, because I know that on the next agenda we're going to be talking about proficiency-based graduation, is where do RNs fit in the transferable skills that the state says all students will have. And actually, I've been working with the state to use RNs as our indicators of those transferable skills. And as we build that transferable skill model, which is required under the educational quality standards, we'll finally, I think, have the dovetail of how it all works together in a way that, because there have been various moving parts, it was never 100% clear. So,
But the first process here, we're quite pleased with kind of some of that melding right now, the way it looks, right?
yes, so I think,
you gotta say yes
it's
now.
going to be very, I think it's going to be great. I finally get a handle really on how we can put it all together, which, you know, has been, again, with between the NIAS stuff and the various different proxies and pieces, you know, I think have been hard to put their hands around. So the answer is, the question is, what's a monitoring report? In terms of the big question, is we're going to be having to do a proficiency-based system eventually, you know, from graduation all the way down to kindergarten. And, you know, kind of like anything else. If this is what it means to graduate, where do 5th graders need to be, 4th graders, 3rd graders, 2nd graders? And that kind of data, we're going to need to modify our report cards, change them, which we're doing, and other reporting mechanisms, so that data would be available. The question on a monitoring report is, what data eventually are you going to want when we really do full monitoring reports? Is it the dipstick at the various grade levels, or something else? Because it is evidence of you know, all kinds of work, but we don't put everything.
Right, no, but I guess it just kind of, the kneecap, the way we see the kneecap and the way we hear about the kneecap is what kind of highlights this question, is that it's always about the cohort. So you know, to look at what's happening with the 5th, 8th grader graduation, I mean, what am I comparing that with? So I can't compare, this year and last year, because those are different cohorts, and somehow that's unsatisfactory for us to understand how we're growing. I mean, I want to understand how each cohort is progressing. And I'm not sure what the answer to that is right now, but that's my concern with why I raised that as a question.
And I think that proficiency will begin to change that discussion.
Sure.
Because it's not about an A or a B or a C anymore. It's not about a minimal threshold, which is a Carnegie unit. But, because eventually, first of all, the proficiency graduation requirements for content will come before you. You have to approve what it means to be a South Burlington graduate. What are the content, which is really, academic proficiency, contents aligned with. The state has determined the transferable skills, and we need to blend that into the document, and again, we'll talk more about that, so that we become a living system in which at any time we can see the growth of students over time. Right now, we have three different, in a sense, systems going on. We have the Common Core state standards. Our report cards don't reflect that, certainly that it's any different in the middle or high school where you're just seeing an A or B or C, and the standards that we've worked to where today the elementary teachers all worked on the English language arts standards to modify the report cards to reflect the new teaching. All that process, goes on, and we're building progressions as part of that. So it's the same standard for kindergarten, now for first grade, now for second grade. So as a parent, you would be able to see the growth of your student because we're defining, those standards in a progression, because the document allows you to do that in a way that the Vermont state standards never did, because it wasn't built that way.
Right.
So,
okay, so we may need to adjust as we're getting there to understand how a particular grade did, not compared to how the 8th grade did the previous year,
right,
but how they did in 7th grade. I don't know how that'll look, but that's kind of
so again, I do think that that's where we're going to be going. Is that eventually you would be able to follow. We've talked about the dashboard, but you'd be able to follow the growth of a student over time, and you'd really be able to see the skills and the proficiencies that they gained as they move to graduation.
Right. I mean, my hope, obviously, when you look at, I think the melding with the ends, our ends work, and where we are with proficiency-based, kind of articulation, I think it goes nicely with kind of the, the developmental success measures that are outlined currently in our ends work. And we absolutely have to have the right grain size, that provides evidence to the board, clarity to the teachers around how to continue to help kids progress, information to the parent, et cetera, that inform our decisions around how we're doing. Right now, I think you hit it right on. It doesn't tell the story. Yeah, So
the other question I had was, are we changing the report cards to more closely match what our ends are, or are we using the current report cards as proxies, which is what's happening here? It seems to be being used as a proxy. It may be a close proxy, but I'm just wondering,
so the plan was last spring and I talked with the principals about changing those to match some of our ends. However, now that there are transferable skills, which are things like communication, self-direction, and so whether we don't want to be doing that until we're ready to actually make the transferable skills the piece there. That's the piece that I want to talk about.
So you'd be changing it twice.
Right. So eventually, again, like I said, and I don't want to go too far down this road, but the transferable skills are required by the educational quality standards. We need to be able to show where students are with them. And I believe that the ends, as we've articulated them, are good indicators of those transferable skills, even if they're not called lifelong learning. One of them is citizenship, and of course, obviously, self-direction very much reflects our personal development. and so on, so.
And the one last question I had is, I assume, this is really heavily weighted towards report cards and such, which is great, that's an important component of it. But as we go forward, are you also going to have, as part of the ends monitoring, particularly on the academic side, results from the SBAC and the like, which I didn't see any kneecap type scores or anything like that in here.
So there are two answers, and again, I don't want to get too far ahead of things. I mean, one is, the SBAC data will be new data, so it won't have any long-term piece to begin with. Yeah. And I have no idea what, it'll be like starting over, as far as that goes. But the other piece that we're working at is, especially at the high school, I don't want to let Pat's rat out of the bag, so to speak, but the rebel assessment tasks, or RATs, that we will be building for the proficiencies. And those local assessments and the tasks, performance-based tasks that we build for that, those will be, I think, in the end, what will really drive our understanding of how students are doing, regardless of how we reflect it on the report card. Because the high school report card still may say A, but we'll know what is behind that A are these performance tasks that are designed for the proficiencies of graduation. So that's a lot of the work we're doing, and in fact, that's what the TLC work in the high school is about proficiency. One group is working on assessment very strongly.
So our next, this is a lot for, I think this hasn't been in front of you a lot of the changes. The proficiency-based graduation has been a want and a need for you on future board meetings. Our next one, we have it on there for you under administrative reports. And again, between Stuart and Patrick.
It won't be a super lot of detail. Patrick will be here. We are in a cohort accepted by the state for professional development that's going to be happening starting in December. We're one of, I believe there were 30 schools, 32 applied, not everybody got it, but we are one of the school districts, and this is a K-12 initiative by the state. We have a principal from the elementary, principal from the middle, as the high, so it's not just a high school thing, and myself, and we'll be doing.
Rebecca Holcomb talked about that during her delivery of some of that work and some pioneering of some of the schools to be taking on that task.
So relative to the high school outcomes, what were the comments about due to lateness?
So I had a group of teachers who were going to work on this, and for a variety of reasons, and I don't want to throw anybody under any buses. So I just want to say that in the end, they did not feel that they could give accurate data that was truly reflective of their student work. They were very, even though they had a rubric, even though they had criteria, they just didn't feel 100% that they could say this was so. And so we're working on that, and that had to do, with just time gets away from people, and all of a sudden it's May and June. So people didn't want to not be accurate in the data, so we didn't collect it. We're working on that.
I just had a question about how the sample was chosen, the 50 middle school students, like how they were selected. It just says 50 middle schools, so how were they chosen to be part of this data set?
Basically, 2 different sections of one team. Okay. So in other words, there are 100 kids on a team approximately. It was 2 different classes, and the teachers reflected on the same 50. So they had them at different times of the day for 2 different subjects.
Okay. So all throughout, it's the same 50 students?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So David, I'm trying to kind of calibrate where we are with this, and was this on our calendar for review of the ends monitoring?
Well, it was something that was brought up at one of our previous meetings to get an update on ends monitoring. Again, I think we need to look at the frequency, particularly as we're going through some of these changes with proficiency-based graduation, PLPs. I think we're going to have to retool a little bit of the monitoring reports. It is on there on the, our monitoring calendar. And
Elizabeth, it was actually a board meeting I wasn't at, but you wanted quarterly
Right,
updates.
Okay.
So this isn't really a monitoring report because we haven't done
yeah, so
since the beginning.
That
really
was my
full one.
question on
Yep.
that.
These are
Okay.
quarterly updates.
Because I think
Trying to get it in
that's probably
front.
the right frequency, because
Right.
I'm kind of looking at this and, I mean, my gut reaction is it's not really satisfying. That's
well, it
just-
provides you a lot of, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so,
You know, these are snapshots as we move the process along, so that the process does move along.
okay. So, I mean, I just wanted to calibrate my own expectations. So we'll see this quarterly again and we'll kind of continue.
Well, it may be
to
a
see-
different format because, as I said, since we decided some of this stuff last spring, a lot of things have
Mm-hmm. Right.
changed with the state, and it's been since day one a moving target. You know, you know, we did some revisions last year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, ends was determined at a time before there was the Common Core,
Mhm.
before, you know, the state was starting to do the new work on educational quality standards. So
This is
that's-
probably
that's
gonna
just
be the
makes it an
case
evolving process.
time-
You were
for-
ahead of the curve,
Mm-hmm.
but we just need to bring it all together.
Yeah, and I think the basic expectations, we know there's gonna be flux.
Right.
We need to sort of put our SB stake in the ground, not so much that it can't change, but just
Right.
in terms of progress. And I know my expectation is we would not see anything on another report that said no reliable
No.
data was
Right.
collected.
Yeah.
I guess, what I would hope, I'll throw out there for the board to consider for asking for the next quarterly report, is to have a timeline and the goals for getting it to where we want it to be. And that it's essentially a to-do list that you guys are following, so we can kind of understand. I
end
hear there's
game,
all
yeah.
these parts that have to be
What are
put
we trying to
together, but I
achieve by
don't
the year end?
understand the timing or that there is a plan. I hear that there is, but I want to see
point out,
it.
the last quarterly report, you did get that
We did see
timeline.
some of
Right,
yeah.
right.
So, I mean, it needs to be revised and
We'll
changed
pull it
from
to-
that.
Right,
but
yeah.
It's not, yeah.
Yeah, I think the timeline in context was sort of, as we're laying the stakes, would be helpful, because I think they go hand in hand.
Right, right.
So
So I
sort of
think that should be a
approaching
part of
end
it.
game would be
Right.
very helpful.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we will move on to agenda item 14, policy 2.2.
You want me to read that?
You've done such a great job.
Yes, please.
2.2, treatment of staff. With respect to the treatment of paid and volunteer staff, the superintendent shall not cause or allow conditions that are untimely, unfair, undignified, disorganized, or vague. And we're focusing on number 6. So further, without limiting the scope of the foregoing by this enumeration, the superintendent shall not, number 6, neglect to provide meaningful and timely performance evaluations to administrators, teachers, and staff. And that was our third reading.
So our normal.
Yes, just to go through the.
I don't know if I have a compliance report on
It's in
that
there.
one in here. So the normal process
Just to go
is
through.
The interpretation.
Well, I don't think we wouldn't have
We-
an interpretation yet.
Yeah.
We haven't adopted this.
Okay.
I think the
Okay.
norm.
So this
Okay.
is.
This was adding
is just-
language.
This is just adoption based on that one that particular change. This is the third reading.
Yeah.
And so then this puts it into the queue then to be,
How about this? I will move that we adopt this amendment to policy 2.2, treatment of staff.
I second that.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye?
Right.
Aye.
And the motion passes.
right.
We'll move on to agenda item 15, consider possible resolution for legislature regarding school funding.
Yeah, and there's a handout by your place.
And Martin, since you've done the lion's share on this very succinct document.
Right, well, and Dan did give me some edits and some suggestions. I just didn't get a chance to incorporate them and get them distributed. But the idea is I just laid out a lot of ideas of what I understand are some of the things kicking around, and maybe some of the things that I've made up myself for dealing with cost containment at a state level and addressing funding. And the idea where this came from is the City Council passed a resolution related to school property taxes and to funding, and essentially saying, I think that the resolution essentially said, we will freeze property taxes. And we had, during a steering committee meeting, expressed a number of reservations with that approach. And this is, the idea behind this was to potentially come up with an alternative resolution that we could put forward to the legislature, and potentially have the City Council join us on that as well. So this is for purposes of discussion. I don't think there's an action item tonight. I would assume that what I would like to be able to accomplish is to understand the board's pleasure, including my 1/4 today, part of it as far as what to put forward. And I'm not suggesting we put forward all these proposals that I have, and I know Dan has had a proposal as well that he will perhaps address. And it's to try to understand how should we approach this and get our skin in the game as far as telling the legislature what we think should be done.
Mm-hmm.
So that's by way of introduction.
So if you had to, if there are a number of proposals, Martin, if you had to pick, prioritize one or two, do you have any that, and let me ask that in two ways, that way. And what was the climate at the School Boards Association meeting? Were there discussions about any proposals that people wanted to kind of put forth?
Well, they had a session, the business meeting of the VSBA, where resolutions were voted on. The resolutions that they put forward is essentially to guide the VSBA. It's not definitively telling the VSBA to go to the legislature and do something. It's to provide them kind of sideboards as they are dealing with the legislature, because they may decide, one of them that was passed has to do with expanding beyond just tenure. Well, there actually isn't tenure in Vermont, but I mean, looking at more than just seniority when there's RIF decisions. That was one of them. But it's not something that the VSBA is necessarily going to take forward this session. But if the opportunity arises, they may. Another one had to do with health care, health insurance. And that one was a very strongly worded proposal, essentially that if there's movement on Green Mountain Care, or other kind of movement in health care in the next legislature, that the association, that union members shouldn't be accepted from whatever's going to happen. So that was one of the others that was put forth there. We don't have those, I don't think. These were, did I propose anything like that with respect to health care?
There was something about health care.
I may have, yeah, I may have actually proposed something similar to that there.
And actually, the other, I don't know if it was a formal resolution, but I know at least one superintendent brought it up in the context of the healthcare panel discussion, which you've highlighted here as the single biggest action that could be taken would be around staffing levels.
Right.
That would also address a cost side of it.
Yeah, and I think that there's, just to summarize on the cost side, what I put forward is there are really a couple different proposals. One is in the realm of consolidation, and it wouldn't be just consolidation of small schools. It could be incentives provided for a district that, like us, that has 3 elementary schools. Is there a reason to consider consolidating elementary schools in a district such as ours, or consolidating smaller schools? So that's one issue. But But also on the cost containment side, there is the general concept of shifting shifting the weight in bargaining, essentially, and including in fact-finding. And that the fact-finding process now, I think there are certain disadvantages to school boards in the fact-finding process. So, in other words, shifting perhaps around the edges how not collateral, but collective bargaining is occurring is another way to perhaps get at salary and benefits and those kind of cost containment measures. So that's kind of another. I don't have priorities. I mean, I was hoping to hear that more from you guys. So.
Let me just offer some observations. I did go through this in some detail. I did offer some comments to Martin. I think I'd like to see this kind of thing pursued first as a white paper to try to gather the ideas and the possibilities that are in there. I think that in doing that, it needs to be, I think, a bit more complete. For example, in the beginning, we talk about 80% of the cost going to essentially employees. There ought to be a statement at least about the other 20%, whether there's anything in there or whether there's not. There ought to be at least a statement in there, and those kinds of details are the kinds of things that I fed to Martin. But I'd like to see it continue to develop. I don't know what the timing for this has to be. I feel that there must be some urgency to try to get it to the legislative people at an appropriate time if we're going to do it. So we ought to figure out what the timetable is that we want to do this against. But I think that there are two pieces in here that somehow need to be understood separately, I guess. I guess that's the best I can do right now for words. But it's, first of all, there's things that are in here that have the potential to reduce expense, to reduce cost. There are some things in here that don't reduce costs. They reallocate how it's collected, how it's paid for, okay? And I think they somehow need to be clearly understood, if not parsed that way in the document itself. So I would hope that we could support trying to develop this with at least another turn or two. I don't know, Martin, if you're willing to take that on, but if you are, you put a huge amount of effort into it to this point, I know, just to get to this point. We ought to try to develop proposals for some of those items that don't have specific proposals to them. So the white paper would be kind of like phase one. Phase two, in my mind, would be trying to sort through that to see if there are some clear priorities or urgent things that we'd want to deal with now. So, and that's I think to the thrust of at least what I thought you were saying, Diane, is there's a lot of stuff here. What's the real meat this time around? Okay. So I would see that as a second one after we had some better idea of what some of the possibilities are and what the consequences of pursuing each one of those would hopefully be.
I'd like to offer, one of the things, again, at the VSA meeting, similarly, the superintendents were also meeting. And one of the things that I think is absent from the conversation is around what I'm going to say, a more efficient and more productive analysis or an audit of the opportunities in which we're looking that are critical for students. We can talk about small schools, we can talk about large schools, but if they're not able to meet the opportunities that we look for in the PLPs, our PBGRs, all of those things, then what are we doing? And I really think it's absent, and we really need to look at what are the opportunities that we believe are critical for our kids to succeed in Vermont. What are they? We've defined a lot of different things, and we ought to be able to say, your school that you go to, does it provide those opportunities? And if it does not, and again, cost is a measure then, because a small school might be able to meet all those opportunities at a more exorbitant cost, which could then be looked at. But I think we're absent right now, and I said this, and again, there's note of that, and I also said we shouldn't be doing this in silos from the School Boards Association. We really ought to be looking at that. And again, Rebecca, in the short time that we had yesterday, we talked a little bit more about that. But I think we're absent in that. I think we're also absent in looking at ways in which we can efficiently render what I would say a more shared option, right? Our school choice option where opportunities can ebb and flow and how the finances can allow that to happen. Right now, under Act 129, it's not allowed. Money doesn't move. Kids can go, or under an approval process, but I think that's in and of itself also absent. Opportunities, but without resourcing.
I agree with you.
And I
The
guess,
foundation has to be opportunity.
yeah, no, that definitely is the case, and it may not have been focused as much.
I'm not
in
saying
here.
you missed.
But yeah, absolutely, and that kind of is certainly in part of the overall message that small schools not only are inefficient often, not always,
Right.
but they can be, but opportunities are lacking. I know that's a focus of Rebecca Holcomb as well. I guess there's a couple ways if we want to kind of prioritize a little bit. And one seems to be kind of coming from the city council resolution, other things, is like this immediate relief on property taxes. And that is more the latter that you talked about, Dan. And there, my view is that the property taxes should only include one of two things. If the expenditure that's being paid for out of the property taxes is not required by the Brigham decision and is not controlled by school boards, it shouldn't be in there. Because these budgets and the property tax increases are coming from the local school board to the local people to vote yes or no. And if there are things that we can't control in there and also are not required from Brigham, they shouldn't be in there. And the biggest one is the Vermont Community High School, the Corrections Department of Corrections. I agree that is part of education, and it should be funded, but it shouldn't be funded through the property tax because it's not required by Brigham, and it's not within local school board's control. And there are others like that. So I think, as you know, it may not give a huge amount of relief, but I think that's one thing we should push that has more to it than what we've seen in the resolution from the city council. So that would be one. The second item that is kind of looking, I guess, a little longer term, and that is being involved in the consolidation question. And I think there we may want to really look hard at it because we have a different position perhaps than the school board association is going to take. We're in a minority as far as what we're facing and what we're dealing with. Most of the school boards and most of the board members on the VSBA come from supervisory unions, come from places that are much more opposed to consolidation than somebody like from Burlington, somebody from South Burlington might be. So I think that's an area we should push perhaps more on because the VSBA is not going to be. And I think that that's going to be one of the big discussions, I think, in the spring from what everybody's been saying, is this consolidation bill that we should probably focus maybe our efforts on really where we stand on that. So those are the kind of the two that I immediately think of. All these other things I think are very important. The shifting the balance in negotiating I think is important. Consolidation does go to the cost issue as well, but.
I think, Martin, the first several pages, I think those proposals would involve multiple steps over time, I think. And, what you said about sort of kind of providing more immediate relief to property taxes. I think about the proposal, to remove the draws that are not required. And then the other one was to increase the transfer from the general fund.
Right.
So both of those, and when I think of those, I think that probably school districts across Vermont could all rally around those. I think with the school consolidation, it wouldn't provide any kind of immediate, it's something we can work on over time, but I think these two, we might be able to, drum up some energy around.
But I think from what I understand, the consolidation issue is going to be front and center as well. So if we want to weigh in on that, and I'd love the board to take a position, for my own personal reasons perhaps too. I think that we probably should consider that if we want to weigh in on what's almost certainly going to be a conversation from what everybody says.
Yeah, and I mean, I'd be hard pressed not to say that healthcare shouldn't be on here, because.
Yeah, and the reason I didn't emphasize that is that that's very much a focus of the VSBA. We can certainly, jump on that bandwagon too, but with the consolidation issue, we may have a different tact on that than the VSBA is doing. And I think on the funding, the other element is kind of to maybe give the city council something different that's really focusing on the property tax issue.
Well, I like, I'll speak for myself, I like how you're thinking about this. I do like Dan's idea of kind of a white paper approach, and I think what it does is set the stage that this board has really thought about a lot of the options, but then I think in a resolution, we could prioritize the ones that you're talking about. Right. But, some of our issue with our local legislators is we haven't been invited to this dialogue. And I think setting this out not only establishes, kind of the framework that this board's thinking about things, with some prioritization around a couple of initiatives that would show up in a resolution, but it also sets the stage for possible future testimony as well.
Right. And I guess the one other thing, just backing up a little bit on something I think we're going to need to come up with a position, it is on the issue of banning strikes and imposition and going to binding arbitration, because that one is almost a certainty is going to be coming before the legislature. And I know that we probably have a different opinion than a lot of, well, we don't have a different opinion than the VSBA, because I do understand, we haven't delved into it deeply, but there's been a little conversation that we're leery about this concept of binding arbitration.
Well, from a next step standpoint, I think we're not prepared to take action today, but from a next step standpoint, I know I would be happy to work with you to flesh this out for maybe another draft to bring back to the board. I don't know if that's...
I did incorporate some comments that you had separately given. I didn't get a chance to incorporate what Dan provided. I can do that and get it out through David for...
Okay.
And I just, I want to be, I don't want to over step my bounds on this. This is yours, but again, I think a very, very important component is to be student specific, even as a board. So, you're looking at rendering a more efficient system that's going to render the outcome that you believe is appropriate for children. And so those opportunities, and again, you've identified the educational outcomes, but I think that student-centered focus is definitely what's going to gravitate and help people move.
Yeah, and so, I wouldn't be opposed to, if we get through, we do another draft of this, if you also want to share it with your administrators as well. I mean, I think it shouldn't just be the board trying to figure this out necessarily. I mean, if other folks, if principals or whoever want to weigh in on this, that would be, I think, helpful.
We in the past, as you know, over the last few years, we've kind of brought forward, I think it's been more of our energy with the legislators through a legislative breakfast, and we've gone through some iterations of sharing and highlighting, informing, whatever you want to call it. I think this is, again, a logical and appropriate next step around, I would say, pretty important times right now that are upon us. So
is the board comfortable with kind of an informal subcommittee coming back with a version 2 and maybe targeting this at the next board meeting?
Sure.
Yeah, especially if we can get it circulated prior to the meeting, because it's kind of hard to read through a document like this and respond to it at the meeting.
Yeah, it's going to, at least from what I have, it's going to have to be done over the next 3 days anyway, because I'm leaving on Tuesday or Wednesday next week for a week, and won't have internet access.
It's a good thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
It is good.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark.
I guess the one other quick question I have is the other cost, the 20%. I mean, if I'm not sure really where to go on there, I would defer actually to the administration to tell me some of the
To be
areas.
clear, my suggestion is only that it not be ignored.
Right, right.
And
Yep.
and that if the statement can say that, there might be a potential for a 1% of that 20%, and that there isn't sufficient leverage in that to make it worth pursuing, I'm okay with that. I just don't want to ignore it.
Sure.
That's all.
No, I agree, but I don't know as much about what those costs are to be able to really say much about them. I know there's energy, there's overhead, there's supplies, there's,
I'm sure John has it in more detail
Well, I would say
that you'll ever be able to
statewide.
digest.
I would say statewide is probably, should increase, because there are a lot of districts don't have the means because of budget votes to take care of their schools.
Right.
And so that's my first thought.
okay.
All right, we'll move on to agenda item 16, tuition adjustment for the fiscal year 2014.
So this is at that time of the year, you've had this before, and we've had, a fair amount of discussion in the past about where we set this. And, I think we're trying to be really sensitive to our sending schools, and those, as you know, have set budgets and now have to make adjustments. And we're also wanting to be in a place where we can continue to be a marketable institution at the high school for us to receive. So what's in front of you, and I'll let John talk a little bit more about it, but essentially the recommendation is that we have no adjustments and we remain at our original amount of the $14,367. John's provided some details around comparability. And let me just stop there. Anything you want to add, John?
The recommendation just follows the law, because if we have missed the mark either higher or lower by 3%, we have the ability to bill that to the districts, but we were really close this year, so.
Or within?
So there's no real action to take except
Except,
yeah. I do think it's interesting to see the tuition compared to other Chittenden County high schools, the allowable tuition, and we're $381 above the median in the county. Actually, I had spoken a couple weeks ago. Our preliminary number was $3,000 higher, but the state had made some mistakes, so we fixed it. So
How
found
did
that.
Winooski get to be 18,000?
It's just the number of kids they have.
there's a,
There aren't the things that Martin's talking about here, the student-teacher ratios.
It's just a denominator issue?
What's that?
Just a numerator or denominator
Yes,
issue?
it is, right.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what you're doing here is telling us that
stays.
we're within the band and therefore we have to stay where we are.
Right.
Within
I think it was last year, or maybe 2 years ago, we had, well, in the last couple of years, we've had some choices. And
Right.
we've done some careful bracketing around where that would rest and kind of where that's at. Again, many of the towns, and certainly, talking with Grand Isle and Georgia or Franklin West, these are big unknowns for them. And in part, it's probably likely that some of those boards will be putting forth some resolutions to put some controls, even further controls on some of this, because coming back with, an allowable tuition adjustment
Right.
can be significant to some of those sending schools.
And do we have any incentive to reduce this in terms of
Well,
attracting tuition students?
that'll be discussion in the next 6 weeks.
This is just a correction.
This is the
Okay.
past year. When we do 16's budget, that's where we can analyze what other districts are charging and see what the preliminary number is. We have to set this rate before even the board sets the budget, so it's a little bit of guesswork.
Okay. So do you need an action on this? So do I have a motion to approve the tuition adjustment for fiscal year 2014 as received from administration?
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes?
Great, thank you.
Thank you, and we'll let all the other particular boards know
Great.
tomorrow where they stand.
All right, we'll move on to setting the agenda for the November 19th meeting.
I have a comment about that. Under the future agenda items, the top two, as of the next meeting, we'll have a 12 check marks. So
Yep.
that's 12 meetings or 24 weeks or 6 months. And I guess I would ask that we make a decision as to whether we want to put those on an agenda or remove them from the parking lot. Because I think that that sort of speaks to whether they're really priorities for us, so.
Or I think the other possibility is that we accumulated enough of these things that we should be declaring a, what do we call it?
Retreat.
Retreat.
Retreat to
It's on my-
discuss this and perhaps some
Right.
other things. And just, I mean, the purpose of getting the check marks here was to just to be a reminder to us that we've been putting this thing off and
Right.
ask the question, does it really matter to us? So I think the issue of whether it really matters ought to be addressed first, but if it still stays on there, we've got to find some capacity to look at these things.
Right.
So a couple things on that, on this agenda. Master planning and visioning should be action, not discussion. I wanted to just recommend or to highlight that I think we need to put budget, timeline / board direction and guidance. And underneath it, I put board retreat question mark, and that may be where we do that and not try to engage that in the agenda, but have a retreat and welcome the public too to that, obviously. And perhaps that might be a place where we do that. I mean, one of the things that I'm definitely, and I've made it clear with the administrators is that we've got, a variety of programs that are currently running, successful, but need some additional direction, focus, purpose, and plan. And it could be, We All Belong, which is our diversity, equity, inclusion. It could be our mentorship. It could be, foundation, alumni. The list is long, and it is connected to the budget because I want to put some additional focus on some of these other important or not programs that have an effect on the outcome of our end. So I think, pulling this into the budget conversation may be, may be informative to me around some of the desire of the board as well. So those would be.
So we should add
Consider.
the resolution
Yep.
back on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the policy monitoring and admin reports, seem like a
Well,
lot.
part of it is that there's been some delay. We wanted to, I want to update you on kind of where we're at with South Burlington and the UVM partnership.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's a huge amount of time. PBGRs are the ones that, again, Stuart was talking more about, and I think it's been on our agenda. It's been on our future agenda items. It will be one of the ones we can take off.
Mm-hmm.
Is definitely connected to a lot of the work that Patrick and the high school, along with Stuart, are working on. So, they're kind of all kind of connected,
And
really.
is 2.2 the actual monitoring report then?
Treatment of staff is due on there, under our calendar.
Okay.
So. Yeah, I don't have that. I don't have the most recent one, I'm sorry. Yeah, so we've,
Okay.
yeah, see 2.2 we had here. It was August, we've moved it. We've done some, obviously, we reworked the,
Yeah. Okay.
so it was really due for monitoring, but we've done some changes to that, so plugging it back in. I don't know that it has to be on that one. We could push it to the next meeting and save us a little bit of time. Maybe that's a smart move.
What's the board's pleasure?
Is it gonna get any less busy in December,
Probably not.
given it's budgeting season as well?
But you got, financial planning and budget, It's up to you. I would probably recommend if we could take one of those off, it would be helpful, given kind of what we have going on.
Would that be the one you take, or would you take 2.8?
I don't know, John? 2.8?
2.8, yeah.
Okay.
It is a
Are you-
work term. No, it's fine.
Oh, boy.
Whatever you wanna
It's
do.
painful. That's good.
So we'll take 2.8
I think that we move
off.
that to December.
Move that to a future one.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, and can I make a suggestion that maybe if we could have, ask Delina to check availability dates on a retreat, so as we go into that, we have a date, a couple of dates available, and then we're just talking about the agenda for that?
Yeah, so find an available date within the next 3 weeks or so? Month, 3 weeks?
Yeah, I'd say 3 weeks.
And kind of
Let's say month, let's say month.
poll the board for an available date, and then
Yeah.
we'll work on agenda once we have it.
Okay.
I have no date the next 3
I have
weeks.
a question on
So 4 weeks, go a month.
December 15th on a Thursday, not a Wednesday?
What was the question, Dan?
December 4th is a Thursday on my calendar. I'm just wondering if we had agreed to shift the meeting date to Thursday instead of Wednesday.
I don't think so.
It's
December
what,
3rd.
It's supposed to be December 3rd on there.
oh, this is
On
for
the-
the
yeah,
next
the-
agenda, the item 13, is that what you're?
Item
Correct.
13, yes.
It's wrong. It should be.
Gotcha.
On the agenda, on the 2.2, are you gonna have an interpretation for our new number 6?
Yes, now I have to do that.
Okay, so
Just trying to move it, though.
Diane, it sounds like we will address items on future agenda
Perhaps through,
through the
Retreat
retreat
agenda.
conversation at the next meeting then.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, we've addressed future agenda items. Consider the minutes of the meetings of October 15th. Any comments or changes to the minutes of the October 15th meeting? Okay, seeing none, those are approved. Any comments or changes to the October 16th meeting? Seeing none, those are approved. And comments or questions on the October 20th meeting? Actually, I've got a 17th one here,
17.
on the October 17th meeting. Seeing none, those are approved. And on the October, I've got an 18th meeting too.
Well, you've had,
It's all one meeting.
yeah, remember, there's a continuation.
Oh,
and
it's like
that's-
our overnight.
Yeah, so we're.
Well, that's how we did it, and it was
It was just recessed for,
correct.
to sleep for an hour.
But you still have to keep.
On the
uh,
October 18th meeting, continuation of a meeting. Seeing none, those are approved. And now the October 20th meeting.
I do have one quick change on that. For the board discussion regarding labor negotiations with teachers, I would just strike the 2-member of the audience, just strike that out. It's unnecessary. At the end of the paragraph there. I mean, it goes without saying. And you need a space between others and commented in the next paragraph.
Okay, and with those changes, seeing no objections, those minutes are approved. Any questions on AP orders 15, 16, or 17?
There were 2 questions that they didn't get to. So, one was our snow contract with IMS. The question was, are we violating policy by paying it monthly for 6 months? I say no. The contract came to the board May 7th for the snow season. The contract calls for paying it in 6-month increments so that we cover the snow season, and that we don't put all the money out at once before the season or at the end so that the vendor can't pay his bills. So
So we're paying it consistent with the pre-approved contract.
yes.
Should I not repeat that one? That's one of the changes.
The
yeah, I
second
think we'll make the change.
second,
Bring it back to the next one, Elizabeth. It's
was
fine.
the same gist. There was a $23,000 payment to Child Care Resource Center for the contract with Growing Kids. They manage a lot of the outreach and the our contacts with the 31,
30 more and growing.
over 30
Mhm.
prepaid providers. And it's paid in a quarterly, it's a contract that's paid quarterly. So that's why you see it 4
So again,
times.
it's a pre-approved contract.
Yes.
Paying according to the terms.
Right.
Okay. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do we need to approve these?
The AP orders?
Yeah.
No, we don't approve those.
No, there was just questions, and that's what John was referring to, some of the questions that,
No, I
Yeah.
even know who asked the question.
Yeah.
Okay, did I have a second on that motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
We are adjourned. Thank you.